our speakers introduce themselves, and we'll go on mute and pass it over pretty much.
Okay, I guess I'll get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Michael Burson. I am a student counselor at Central Piedmont Community College, and pronouns are he, him, and his. Denise, do you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'll go. Hi, everyone. I'm Denise Keating, and I am a librarian at Central Piedmont Community College, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers.
Morning, everyone. I'm Jerry Landry. I'm a technical project developer with our talent development group at Central Piedmont Community College, and my pronouns are he, him, and his.
And so we're not really like a formal technical group or anything at Central Piedmont. We're really like a grassroots effort of people who we've been providing these safe zone trainings for quite a few years to staff and students at Central Piedmont. And so we're really grateful that y'all reached out to us to provide the training here because we think it's a great training and lots to go through. So we can dive right into it if we're ready. All right, I'm going to share a screen. Host is disabled, screen sharing.
Kate, you got it? Okay, cool.
There we go. All right. And successful. All right, so this is LGBTQ 101 and being an effective ally. And there's our names, so you can know how to spell. And I'm doing this successfully. There we go, okay. So Denise, this is you. Can we see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. Denise might be frozen. Uh-oh.
Yep. All right. I'm going to start participating in this training. Yes. Can you see? I'm talking.
Okay, I can hear you.
Okay, I was talking. Okay. I thought everybody was listening. Okay. All right. Let me start again. Hey, happy to have you all here. And so we just thought we'd set the stage and for the training as we get started. So just some guiding assumptions. We understand that it's okay to make mistakes or ask questions. This is the Vegas rules, so whatever is discussed here stays here. We ask you to be respectful in our conversations. It's okay to laugh because it's okay to
Denise, you are frozen again, just so you know.
The fun of technology.
I do not know.
I'm sorry, Denise. Oh no, you're back. Okay, I'm gonna.
Am I back?
You're back now.
Dang it. All right. Continuing, let's see if I don't freeze. So we're all here.
Okay.
Did we lose her completely now?
I think so.
Okay, I'll take over while she tries to figure herself out. Sorry about that. So we're here to create affirming, supportive environments wherever we are. So wherever your individual areas are throughout your work and throughout your social lives and whatever else, that's what we're here to do. Denise, you're back. I hope we can hear you.
I don't know, I reconnected.
Okay.
Obviously, I guess my connection is not that great, or maybe due to the weather now that it's raining over here, who knows?
Maybe.
But thanks, Michael, for popping up.
Yeah, I think
this is what we love about being virtual, right?
Yeah. We're good here, so let's see what we're not here to do.
Hey, we are not here, right, to change anyone's political view, social or religious views. Here to discuss.
Pretty much.
Obviously, my connection's not working.
Okay. I'll take over while we figure that out. So this is what we're going to do today. So we're going to learn how to articulate appropriate terminology. We're going to talk about language to begin with, then go through the issues facing the LGBTQ community currently, increase our comfort and skill in supporting LGBTQ individuals, and then we've got a lot of great resources to share at the end. So let's dive in. So this is going to be one of our participatory activities. And so if I don't know if everyone has something to write with, we probably should have prefaced that beforehand, but if you have something to write with, or if you can open up a document on your computer or something, what we're going to do to kind of introduce ourselves to each other, y'all might be familiar with each other, but we don't know who you are, is to write down a couple of things real quick. We'll just take a couple minutes to do this. So first, it's going to be your job and what you do, the 3 most important people in your life. And if you have more than 3, that's okay. We're not going to make you choose between your children if you have more than that. But the 3 most important people in your life, the 3 most important events that have occurred in your life, and 3 things that you enjoy doing in your free time. Doesn't have to be an essay, just a couple of things to get your mind going. So 30 more seconds or so, just a couple of things. We good? I don't see people looking down so much. Okay, so now we'll give everybody the opportunity to introduce yourselves to me, Denise, and Jerry. The thing is, though, you are not allowed to talk about any of the things you just wrote down. Those things are all forbidden topics, and you cannot share them. So we'd like you to introduce yourselves without mentioning any of those things. Okay? Does anybody want to go first?
And if any of the attendees, if you guys would like to have your video on, just let me know in the chat and I can upgrade you to panelist.
Just a quick introduction from anybody.
Sure, I'll go ahead and go first. I'm Alex Brooks, and I work at a museum. And like to do a lot of things.
Interesting. Okay.
How's that?
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Who'd like to go next?
I'll go. My name is Jessica Bustamante, pronouns she, her, hers. I work at a historic site, and I have a cat sitting next to me.
Those are the facts. Okay.
Okay, I will go. I'm Kate. I live in Charlotte. I'm originally from Georgia. And I am sitting in my house near my very hateful chihuahua.
Okay.
Monica, if you want to type in your introduction, that would be good.
And Monica, you're going to need to yell at January later for not being here.
It's because I'm screen sharing. I'm not able to see what people are writing, but
So Monica mentioned that her camera and laptop, or her camera and her microphone are not working on her computer.
No worries. You know, the technology limitations are a thing. If anybody else wants to introduce themselves?
I'll go.
Okay.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Alexis Warford. I'm really here just to learn how to become an effective ally. I'm not really part of the LGBTQ community, but I have several friends that I would love to learn how to support them, and just the entire community, and just, you know, just learning more.
Great.
All right, great. And it looks like Monica says she lives in Kannapolis and works in Charlotte.
Okay.
And is currently working in a library and has lived all over the U.S. And Allison says that she is a Charlotte native and has 2 cats and also works in a library.
Yeah, my wife's a librarian, so I love how many librarians are here today. Okay, so thank you all for taking the time to introduce yourselves. So, so what was this like for you after, and you can still use the chat, what was this like for you introducing yourselves and having to leave all of this kind of really important information off?
It definitely feels like it's less of a valuable introduction when you're not really saying much about who you are, what you do, kind of the things that are important to you.
Mm-hmm. A lot of stuff gets left off.
And I noticed that numerous folks mentioned where they work, but not kind of what they do. So kind of skirting around that job and what you do. And Monica shared that it was hard because she admitted very important things in her life.
Right. And so the reason we do this activity to start up this training is it does a pretty good job of showing a little tiny piece of what it's like to kind of be in the LGBTQ community. We're going to talk about the coming out process later, but it's not something that just happens and then it's done and everybody knows and everybody's fine and everybody's cool. There's this constant negotiation of, is this a safe place for me to share, okay, here, hi, my name is Michael and this is my husband, Rick. Or is it okay for me to talk about where I went this weekend, who I hung out with, what kinds of things I do in my spare time, who I do that with, do I go to Pride, what are people going to think about me if they know that I went to Pride, or they think, well, why do you care so much? Is it because you're part of the community? Are you gay? Are you making assumptions about you? And so being LGBTQ, and we're going to talk about what all of that means in a little bit, but LGBTQ means a kind of this constant navigation of, is this a safe space? Can I talk about this? Who can I talk about this with? And that takes up a lot of mental space. Imagine if we could just all just be out and open and talk about our lives and be whole and authentic all the time. We really wouldn't have to spend so much time thinking about navigating all of that. And so it's great that y'all are all here today because that's kind of what the purpose of this training is to do, is to help create these safe spaces so that LGBTQ people can feel more comfortable and more safe moving through their lives and moving through workspaces and community spaces. So let's dive into getting started with that. So language. So we got to start with language. If we go to a foreign country, you need to learn the basics about how to get around so that you don't end up getting lost. So we always start this training starting with language. So we kind of have the alphabet soup here. Like you've probably heard LGBT. There's LGBTQ. We use that a lot in this training. LGBTQ, LGBTQI, LGBTQIA, LGBTQIAU, LGBT+. There's a whole lot of different letters out there. And sometimes it's like, well, what do these all mean? And maybe you do know what they all mean. But we're going to start kind of with the basics so that we can move on from there. So We've got kind of two categories here. We've got common sexual orientations and common gender identities. We're going to dive deeper into that a little bit later in the training, but common sexual orientation and sexual orientation and gender identities are two different things. They are not necessarily related even in any way. It's sexual orientation is over here and gender identity is over here. So when we talk about the language that's developed around sexual orientation, so gay, like homosexuality was not even like a word until kind of the late 1800s. It was really invented by the medical community to differentiate between same-sex attraction and different sex attraction. So heterosexual, homosexual is this big desire to categorize everything. We need to put everything in order. We need to medicalize it. We need to have it in our manuals so that we can diagnose and determine what people are and who they are. So homosexual wasn't invented by the gay community. It wasn't chosen by the gay community. It was the medical community, doctors and psychiatrists and things that created that term and then applied it to the community. So gay was really being used for the first time like in the 1920s and 1930s. And so yeah, gay, like gay meaning happy. So you watch stuff and read books from the, y'all are historians, so read books from that time period and see like, oh yeah, the gay party, having a gay old time. And so yeah, that really was where that word came from. And so same-sex attracted people would gather in these kind of safe spaces, think like speakeasy kind of days, and they would have these gay parties. And so straight people would be like, oh yeah, oh, they're having that gay old time. And yeah, they were having a really gay old time. So that was really the first time that the word gay was being, that the community was deciding what word they wanted to use for themselves. So self-identifying what was important and using that terminology for them. Lesbian really started showing up in the 1970s. Women were like, you know, dudes, like you're doing your thing over here, we're doing our thing over here. We really need kind of these different terminology to define ourselves. And so that's when women really started using lesbian more with a feminist movement, kind of defining their own experience as different from that of men. Bisexual was really showing up more in the 90s. Bisexual people, so bi meaning two, so attracted to two men or women, different points, different times for different reasons, which we'll get into a little bit later. But bisexual people were saying, you know what, like we're not gay, we're not lesbian, we don't really fit either of these boxes, so we really kind of need our own box. And then with the advent of the internet, there's just this huge explosion of communication because people aren't just existing in the shadows anymore. They have the opportunity to communicate and share with each other and define their own experiences. And so that's where we have pansexual, so pan meaning across. So pansexual people kind of identifying as, you know what, it's hearts, not parts. It's it's whatever kind of person. Gender doesn't really play a role in what I'm attracted to. I'm attracted to that individual for whatever kind of reason. Asexual people who don't experience sexual attraction or that's not an important part of their lives, identify as asexual. We got queer on here. I know queer can make people squirmy. So let's talk about queer for a second. So queer is definitely still an insult. It's definitely still a word that is used outside of the community, like kind of like you queer, you're a queer. That's still definitely, that kind of terminology is still an insult. It's like calling like a woman who's blonde, like, oh, you're such a blonde. It doesn't have necessarily the same kind of insulting connotation to it, but that's kind of similar. It's kind of defining a whole person, an intersectional person down to one trait. So if it's used as a noun like that, that's when we're seeing it used as an insult. When we're seeing it used more as a verb to describe someone's experience, that's when they get to take ownership of what that means for them. And so we've really seen a huge reappropriation of the word queer by people saying, you know what, like, I'm maybe a gay man and I'm attracted to men, but then I see this really masculine woman and she's got these broad shoulders and she's really tall. And so I'm attracted to her too, but I'm not really bisexual because it's not kind of all men and all women. It's this very particular kind of woman. So what I'm queer. You know what? I'm queer. I'm picking up on whatever I'm picking up on, and that's what I'm going to do. So we've really seen a lot of people adopt the word queer to decide, like, to get to define their own experience, because it doesn't have as many connotations as words like gay and lesbian mean. When you hear the word gay, you can kind of come up with your own stereotypes and your own ideas of what that looks like. But queer, it's like, I can't put you in a box. I can't kind of peg you in a position. And queer people actually really prefer it that way, because then you get to ask, so what does that mean? And then people who identify as queer get to explain maybe what that means to them. So we've really seen that been used a lot more kind of the younger generation, and saying, like, I don't really like all these labels. I'm going to use queer to define my experience, for whatever that means for me. So I'd say exercise caution. Don't just be throwing queers around all over the place, because we don't want to do that. But if someone says it's like, yeah, I identify as queer, spaces, then it's definitely more appropriate to use. Perfectly fine just saying like LGBT, that's cool too. LGBTQ is perfectly fine. If you're kind of squirmy about using queer for yourself, that's fine. Own that squirminess. And just know that there are definitely people who are identifying as queer, and that if they disclose that to you, then you can have a conversation about what that means. Like, okay, so is this something that is okay for me to share? So that's where we're sitting with queer. And we can circle back around to that if there's more questions. But the other one we've got on here is undecided or questioning. So sometimes the Q can mean queer, and LGBTQ, it can mean queer, or it can mean questioning. Questioning is really more of a space for younger people to have space to decide kind of what their attractions look like, before having to make a lot of decisions about labels. So it's like, yeah, I'm going through puberty, I'm feeling some feelings, I'm figuring stuff out, I don't really know what I am right now, I'm undecided, I'm questioning, and that's perfectly fine. You don't have to come out. The average coming out age is around 11 now, but it's not something that people have to figure out right away as soon as their puberty hormones start pumping through their bodies. And this certainly isn't all of them. This is just an introduction to some of the more common terminology. So if we've got more questions about that, I think we do have room at the end for more questions. So jot those down. I know that y'all are probably pretty good note takers. So jot that down. And these slides will also be available. So don't feel like you have to write down everything. So that's what we got with sexual orientations. Let's jump over to gender identities. So gender identities, so that is the inner sense of what your gender is. So whatever the doctor said, or whatever, we're going to get into that more specifically in a little bit. But so this is how you feel about your gender, about you. So we got transgender. So trans meaning like across. So trans gender. So those are people who are medically assigned one gender by the doctor, and then as they move through their lives, their hearts and minds and souls are a different gender. So medically assigned male, but my internal sense, I am female. So trans female. So you see transgender female or trans. Both are fine. Trans is a really, really common. Sometimes you'll see trans with little asterisks. That kind of turns it into an umbrella term. So trans plus anything else. But trans is perfectly fine to use, and transgender is perfectly fine to use. We don't use transgendered. It's not something that happened to you, it's something that you are. So we like transgender in the present, or trans is good practice there for language. Because binaries exist, and we have to have all our binaries when it comes to language, cisgender is in the opposite of that. And so I'm cisgender male. I was medically assigned male at birth. I feel that I am male. I am a cisgender male. So those two things line up. Where transgender, it doesn't line up. So that's the difference. Intersex are people who actually exist somewhere outside of that really pretty binary that Western civilization really likes to cling to. And so you might remember in your high school biology classes where you did the Punnett squares, where usually I would use this on a board right now, but technology. So yeah, like you do the Punnett squares, and you do XX and you do XY, and then you do your Punnett squares, and there's a 50-50 chance that everything will line up perfectly, and it's a boy or girl, and everything's good, right? So what happens when the baby's born with two X chromosomes and a Y chromosome, which is Klinefelter syndrome? What happens when it's just X or just Y or O, which is another option? When we first started doing this training, there were 12 known ones, different genetic combinations, and now there's somewhere over 30. And we're knowing more because we're looking more at chromosomes as when it comes to people's genders. And so nature is not like this clean dichotomy of these two options. It's really a lot more complex than that, and all kinds of stuff can happen whenever a baby is growing in the womb and those cells are separating like crazy. Lots of stuff can happen. And so intersex people, that's kind of a blanket term for anybody who exists outside of that kind of typical XXXY or some other genetic, chromosomal, hormonal, physiological deviation. Very interesting stuff, finding more about intersex people. Indeterminate agender, non-binary, and genderqueer are kind of all mean the same thing, but people identify in different ways. Gender fluid is another way of looking at that. So that's all just people kind of taking ownership of their gender and saying, I'm not going to just exist in these two boxes. I'm not just going to wear skirts. I'm not just going to wear pants. I'm not just going to wear blouses. I'm not going to just paint my fingernails. I'm not just going to have my hair a certain way. I'm going to decide how I'm going to express myself and express my gender and my internal sense of how I feel about myself. So that comes from the inside out. So anytime people are saying non-binary, gender fluid, gender queer, all of that stuff kind of relates to that. It's the expression of how you put it out there in an internal sense. So some days I feel more feminine, some days I feel more masculine, and I'm going to express that however I choose. Native American Two-Spirit is another category of kind of gender identities, which we're going to dive deeper into kind of third genders around the world. So very fascinating stuff there. So that's more of a cultural demarcation rather than kind of a medical or maybe an internal sense. But their Western civilization is really one of the few in the world that really clings to the binary. We love the binary a lot. And so other cultures around the world have created spaces for kind of transgender or indeterminate type genders. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So that's your quick intro to some of these words, and you might have heard some of them before, but hopefully we've added some clarity on what some of these words kind of mean and where they come from. So let's dive a little deeper now. And now that we've got our language, we've got like, so where's the bathroom? Please and thank you. Yes, no. Can I have a margarita? We've got the language figured out now. So let's dive a little deeper into some of these things that we've talked about. So sex. So sex is the chromosomes. It's science. It's what you're born. It's really clear. It's really precise. Everything's exactly where it needs to be because the doctors say so. Well, sex is really medically assigned. So when the mom has the baby and the baby comes out, and you know, I'm not a parent, this is how you hold babies, right, by their feet, and right, and you look at the genitalia and you say, okay, you have a boy, and you wrap it up in a blue blanket and you send it home. And then you look at the genitalia and say, oh, you have a girl, and you wrap it up in a pink blanket and you send it home. So what about when we have some of the intersex stuff that we were talking about earlier? What happens when externally looks female, genitalia looks typical female, send it home? We don't test chromosomes on babies. Usually that's really not something that we do. That's a really uncommon practice. And so a girl grows up, is raised like a girl, starts going through puberty, starts having some abdominal pain, like, oh yeah, I'm starting my period, everything's normal. But then the abdominal pain doesn't go away, and gets worse and more painful, and go to the doctor and we do an x-ray to see how everything's going, and turns out this girl has undescended testes where her ovaries should be. So the gonads didn't form the way they're supposed to. So what do we do with this information? And so that's where we get into the intersex stuff, where this is really complicated because we don't do testing. We just do the medically assigned glance at whatever the genitalia looks like. And this image that we have on here, the phallometer, is a little magnet. It's like a little 2-inch magnet that's put out by the Intersex Society of North America. And it really shows the kind of ambiguous standards that come in from the kind of medical assignment, the medical practices of who is what, where we see like the length of the clitoris and then the length of the phallus. And so if the clitoris is too long, if it doesn't meet kind of these ambiguous medical standards, then the doctor will go, okay, we need to do a corrective surgery. And so we do that. And this isn't like a third world thing. This is like happens in Charlotte. This happens all the time. We know a lot more about intersex issues now because we're actually looking at it, and doctors are actually looking at this stuff and encouraging like maybe some delays, some decision-making processes. Some parents are saying, no, I want my child to make this decision for themselves. Some parents are saying, no, I want everything to be normal and be healthy, right? Everything just needs to be healthy, so do whatever you need to. And so we do these surgeries on babies at birth or at 6 months that we don't really know if they're medically necessary. I'm not a parent, so I'm not here to tell anybody how to raise their children or what is right and what is wrong. That's not really what we're about here. I'm just kind of informing that this is a thing that happens, and that this medical assigned stuff, these are just people figuring this stuff out. This isn't like some perfect system that doctors have discovered years ago and now it's all good. We're still figuring this stuff out. And so medical practices change and adapt over time. And so we need to be aware of that kind of stuff. So, so sex is a lot more complicated than just a clean little binary like you maybe learned in high school biology. Gender identity is next. So gender identity is the inner sense of being male, female, or something else. So how the heart and mind regard the body. So this is feeling masculine, feeling feminine, androgynous, whatever. So trans people have that inner sense. So they're medically assigned one thing, but the inner sense is different from whatever the doctor said. So trans people, even if they never, ever, ever express these thoughts to another person, they never go through hormone replacement therapy, they never go through surgery, they never change their clothes in any way, they are still trans. Whatever happens, they are still trans people because of their inner sense. So trans people are not defined by their gender expression, which is the next thing, the outward communication of gender. It's the inner sense. So whatever steps, if any, they ever take to kind of display that transness, they are still trans. So we don't need to put expectations on trans people like, oh, well, do you want to start wearing dresses now? It's a choice that trans people have the right to make about themselves. So there's not like doing trans the correct way. Everybody, just like cisgender people, should be allowed to express the gender in a way that is most appropriate to them. So gender expression, the way we put our gender out there, so that's our mannerisms, our hairstyles, our clothing choices, voice and body language, are all ways that we communicate our gender to other people. And you're all doing it right now. I wore this polo shirt. It's called whatever, gender neutral, whatever, but it's a men's polo. I don't know why we call it that. It's not cut like a lady. And so think about the clothes that you put on every day. How are you expressing your gender to the world? Are you addressing this hyper feminine thing that works for you, hyper masculine thing that works for you, somewhere in between? We all do this. Trans people, cis people, we all do it. We all express our gender different ways. And we should all have the ability to do that the way that we feel is most authentic to ourselves. So sexual and romantic attraction are usually the things that people are most interested in, right? That's what we see in the tabloids, like who did what in what bathroom, who is dating who. So this is the part that people get really, really invasive about. So just like heterosexual people, homosexual people, LGBTQ people, it's an enduring, emotional, romantic, sexual, affectual, intellectual, and relational attraction to other people. So the LGBT community really tends to be over-sexualized. It's really just this hyper-focus on whatever they're doing in their bedrooms or wherever else in the world. So just like with straight people, there are hypersexual straight people, there are hypersexual gay people, and then there's people who just want to go on a nice date and hold hands and do whatever else that couples do. So we need to try to get away from this kind of over hypersexualized ideology of the LGBTQ community. We've got asterisk next to romantic and sexual because for asexual people, they don't have, the sex is not part of it. They can go on dates with people, maybe want to hold hands with people, and be in relationships with people, but the sexual piece is not part of that. And so we need to make sure that we acknowledge that too. So, kind of a way of understanding all of this in one space is this really great image of the genderbread person. And so this does a really good job of showing how all of these things are going on with all people at all times, and that it is on a spectrum. So it's not just feelings of womanness or feelings of manness. Somewhere, sometimes that's somewhere on this spectrum, this in-betweenness. So like with sexual attraction, it could be like I've got mostly attracted to women, but you know, men are in there somewhere. There's some good looking dudes out there. So it's somewhere on that spectrum. Romantic and sexual attraction are separated out here because maybe you're liking looking at other people, but you don't necessarily want to date them. So I like how that's separated out there. And so a really good way of understanding this is your gender expression is what your pants or your skirt or your kilt or whatever look like. Your biological sex or medically assigned sex is what's in your pants or your skirt or your kilt. Your gender identity is how you feel about what's in your pants. And then sexual and romantic attraction is whose pants you want to get into. So that's, and this is all going on for all, this is all of you, me, everybody else in the whole world. We're all experiencing all of this at one time. So this is a good thing, even for straight allies to understand. It's like, how is my gender identity playing out? How is my expression playing out? Who am I attracted to? Do I want to date them? Do I just like looking at them? Whatever else. So we all have this. So that kind of summarizes it all in one little image. So yeah, so now let's talk about the LGBTQ community. So some of the things that we need to be aware of in the community. We definitely want to start with trans. So trans people often get kind of relegated off to the end, kind of seen as, well, sexual orientation, like, well, we've got ourselves figured out. We just want to date whoever we want to date. Y'all kind of have these other issues about your gender and hormones and all that stuff, so y'all go figure that out over there. So we want to start with trans to make sure they don't get left in the back. So like I've already talked about, trans is an umbrella term, so you can see it as trans with the asterisk sometimes. That's not as common very much anymore. It's more just trans. Transgender is also cool. There's kind of been some new language around, you might have seen chosen name before versus preferred name. So like putting on a form, like, what is your preferred name? Kind of updating that language to chosen name. So trans people, when talking about naming, you'll hear the word dead name. And so it's like, well, my parents gave me the name Becky when I was born, but I am not Becky. I am Mark, and do not refer to me as Becky. I am going in a new direction in my life, and Becky is dead, so to say. So dead name, so it's do not refer to me as Becky. That is not who I am. But Becky is still on all of his driver's license, passport, documentation, social security card, all that stuff. So that can cause a lot of angst with trans people, because it's like this constant reminder that this is not who I am. And it's really hard to get those things changed. So we like the word chosen name because it's not something you prefer, it's something that you chose, right? So chosen pronouns is another thing to think about, chosen name. So if you've got like paperwork or forms in your area that like, I'm a counselor, and so we do intake paperwork. So that's the kind of language that we try to use around that. Passing versus clocking is another thing that's kind of a concern in the trans community. So passing, so what that means is that you pass as the gender that you're looking to do. So like a trans woman, so medically assigned male at birth, then an internal sense of being a woman, so a trans woman. who wants to look like a woman and wants to appear as a woman, as a typical woman, and to be walking down the street and for people not to think, well, there's a dude dressed as a lady. So that's kind of passing. It's I pass as a woman, as a trans woman. Clocking is kind of the other part of that. So a lot of trans people are saying, yes, I'm trans, and you can tell I'm trans, and I'm going to show you everything so that you can know that I'm a trans person because my identity is different from these cute little boxes that y'all like to cling to so much. So this kind of this expectation that trans people need to pass in order to be happy or be accepted is not necessarily the case. Some people have the desire to pass, and we should certainly help them do that however it works for them. And some people, it's just not that important to them. So it's the individual's decision to be able to decide how they want to move through the world, and we should do everything we can to help them do that. There's a lot of disparities when it comes to healthcare. It's like, imagine if so my name's Michael. If I went to the doctor and the doctor, the medical assistant came out and said, Francine, where's Francine? I'm not going to go to the doctor and have to deal with that. I'm just going to not go. I don't want to deal with that every time. I don't want to be called the wrong name every time I go to a doctor's office. I don't want to get up on a table and have my genitals exposed when I have a lot of problems with my genitals. I don't feel like they belong on my body. This is just a total wrong feeling to me. I don't like being reminded of that. And so there's a lot of preventative health care that gets missed sometimes in the trans community. And those people, that's like, wow, if we had caught this earlier, we could have done something about it. And so we need to be super conscious of that. That's something that trans people absolutely face. We already talked about the marginalizations of kind of like gay, lesbian, or bisexual people saying, you know what, we've got our gender figured out, we're good, y'all go figure yourselves out, when they don't have access to healthcare, increased exposure to discrimination, violence, all of that stuff are things that the trans community is facing. So we want to be as supportive as possible to our trans folk because they can really use our help. So brief overview of that. Oh yeah, I mentioned that we were going to talk about third genders around the world. So yeah, we've got like an example, Native American Two-Spirit. And so that phrase really came about more in the 90s, kind of tribes getting together and saying, hey, we all have this really similar thing where we've got room for these other genders. We've got the men and we've got the women and we've got the Two-Spirit. So Two-Spirit people, it's kind of creating space for transgender, non-binary people, and it's just always been there. It's just always been part of Native American society. And then the Westerners came over and said, no, you will have men and women because that creates a power differential. And if we have two groups, then one's on top and one's on the bottom. So you need to stick to that. So get rid of this Two-Spirit thing. So the tribes really started getting together more in the 90s, and we're saying, what do we call this thing so we can kind of all be on one page about it? And so that's where Two-Spirit kind of came from. We've got some other examples here. So the Hijra of India and the Fa'afafine of Samoa are all just in society. They're just like, oh yeah, there's a Fa'afafine over there. And it's just part of the world. It's just part of society. It's not something that's really blinked an eye at. And so it's really more kind of that Western white civilization type stuff that's really clinging to the binary because we really love the binary. But other societies around the world don't cling to it quite so hard. So those definitely exist out there. So then we're going to do a video about pronouns, and then we're going to move back to Denise. Hopefully your connection is back. So let's watch this. Let me know if there's any issues with the sound.
The first time you ask someone what pronouns they use, it may feel awkward. You may even be worried that you'll offend the person. But assuming someone's gender and getting it wrong could actually be more offensive. This is called misgendering. If you happen to misgender someone, acknowledge your mistake, but be aware that over-apologizing can just make things more uncomfortable. Just say you're sorry and move on. As with anything else, practice makes perfect, so let's walk through some examples to make it less intimidating. Here we are at the local library. Here we are at the local library with Brian and Star. Brian greets Star at the book club meeting.
Hi, my name is Brian. I use the pronouns he and him. How about you?
What's great about this scenario is that Brian shares his own pronouns before he asks for Star's. This breaks the ice and makes the exchange conversational rather than one-sided. Sometimes, You might be mid-conversation and realize that you never asked for the person's pronouns. It's not too late. If that were to happen, Brian might say,
Star, I just realized I never asked what pronouns you use.
asking about pronouns is becoming more common, but not everyone is used to doing it. Putting pronouns into practice sometimes involves managing reactions. If Star responds with,
"Why are you asking me this? Isn't it clear?"
Brian might say,
I ask everyone this question because I want to be respectful and not make any assumptions.
if Star is like,
"Pronouns? What do you mean?"
Brian might respond,
I mean, do you use the pronouns he, him, she, her, they, them, or something else?
keep in mind, singling people out can make them feel uncomfortable. So if you're in a group setting, you'll want to ask everyone what pronouns they use, not just the people you're unsure about. And be sure to share your pronouns as well. Whether you realize it or not, by doing this on a regular basis, you're changing the culture around you.
All right. So quick video about pronouns. So yeah, it is absolutely definitely becoming more common. We're implementing that at Central Piedmont, like in our HR orientation. We're having people write their name and their pronouns on their little place card, like on their first day of work. We start out these trainings by sharing what our pronouns are. And so pronouns is a way you refer to someone when they're not present. And so he, him, his, she, her, hers, they, them, theirs, those are all the most common ones. You saw in the video, there's also like Z and quite a few other ones out there. Those are super uncommon. You might have encountered them in your spaces moving through life, but like at Central Piedmont at the like Pride Alliance meetings, I don't think they've ever had someone who uses like Z and sheer and some of the other ones. So they, them is really more common. They, them is officially a plural, a singular pronoun, excuse me. So the Webster's Dictionary defined that as a singular pronoun. So grammar police don't get to come after that anymore. Sorry, it's over. So it's they can refer to one person. If you're thinking about grammar, you can still use they in the plural sense, like they're going over there. I just use they, it's fine. So like, oh, cute dog, what's their name? It's a similar situation. So asking about pronouns is great. Sharing your pronouns is great. I've got pronoun buttons in my office that I haven't been to in 4 months. So it's definitely a more common thing. And especially with our students, we're trying to do it a lot more so that we can be respectful of them and not refer to them in the wrong way. Okay, so now we're gonna go back to Denise, and I hope your sound's working better.
I hope so. I'm back. What did I miss? What did I miss? So anyway, Hamilton reference if you missed it. Anyway, okay, so we're going to talk about coming out. That can mean lots of different things for lots of different people. So phew, I've come out. Ooh, it's over. I don't have to do that anymore. Well, that's not necessarily correct, right? So it does happen in stages. It's really not a linear process, and it really occurs over the course of your lifetime. So a lot of things are thought about daily. So I met a new person. Should I mention my wife, or should I talk about things about myself that way? You know, it's a constant decision-making thing. What will be the reaction of the person when I start talking about my family? The most important thing, of course, is confidentiality. People may come out to you, and you kind of really need to understand if they're just coming out to you or if they're just out. So it's really good and clear to make sure you understand that, because you don't want to out someone that doesn't want to be outed to other people. You see over here, we see students in the real world. We just kind of talk about Time Out Youth. Time Out Youth helps a lot of youth in the area, and they usually have a policy, or if someone that works at Time Out Youth sees one of their youth in the community, they're not one to just kind of go up and say, hey, how you doing today? So they kind of leave it up to the person or the youth to kind of come up to them. So they really want to honor the confidentiality when they're outside of Time Out Youth area. So next slide. Okay, so why would we come out? So you can either unmute yourself and say that. So can you kind of give us some reasons of why you want to come out? Or you want to put it in the chat? That'd be great too. We can kind of have a conversation about what that is. Why would someone want to come out?
definitely hard to live without having come out, mentally and emotionally and spiritually, for oneself.
Okay, right. Anybody else? To be the most authentic self, correct? Yep, excellent. Thank you. Anyone else?
I feel like some people end up coming out because they're around someone that's being homophobic and they want to be like, look, you need to stop because this is me that you're talking about. Kind of like that, like when you're in a situation and a fellow white person kind of gives you the nudge and says something racist because you're a fellow white person, so of course you agree with them. So it's a way to say, like, no, I don't agree with you.
It's a form of advocacy, yes. But somebody else was trying to say something too?
I was going to say similar to Alex. I mean, once you have felt things out and you feel like you know somebody, a colleague or a friend or someone well enough, then you want to be able to talk about your partner or your dating or, you know, whatever it is about yourself that is your daily life.
It's all, those are all great things. So, right, living an open and whole life. And then it's just establishing more connected relationships. You know, it's a lot of work being someone that, you know, that you're not. So it's a lot of work to do that. And it really builds self-esteem as well, because then you're living your true self, like someone said, and you're able to be who you are and connect with your social circle as well as building a community as well. So those are all great things. So what might be some risks though?
Losing your family, a lot of your friends.
Correct.
Aside from possibly, you know, losing your job.
Physical violence.
Yep. Yep. Go ahead, Michael. Right. So one of the biggest risks, I think, is being disconnected from your family and friends and coworkers. And that happens. A lot of youth, when they come out, they're kicked out of their homes. And so that can be, you know, it is a traumatic experience. So that's one of the main reasons that people stay in the closet. And then some relations are permanently changed. You may experience harassment and discrimination and violence, as someone mentioned. While there are protections now under Title VII, and we'll talk about that a little later, you know, those things don't necessarily change people's opinions or processes. So those still exist. Some young people, like we just talked about, will be kicked out of the home, and Time Out Youth can help and support that area. So there are some risks, and one of the other risks is like if you're an ally, if you go ahead and say that you're an ally, well then, oh, well, why are you an ally? They assume that you might be part of that community as well, and that may be a risk for some people. So those are some of the kind of things that happen. There are great benefits, but today there are still risks and people need to be kind of aware of those. So we're going to talk a little bit about these three terms. And so heterocentrism is the idea and assumption that all people are heterosexual, right? So you walk in a room, everybody is straight or heterosexual. So everybody assumes that. When you talk to someone and it's male and you say, oh, so what does your wife do, right? So everybody's assuming that everybody is heterosexual. Heterosexism, of course, is the system of oppression that gives privileges to heterosexual people to the disadvantages of those who are not, right? So if I'm straight, you know, there's certain privileges associated with that. Homophobia is the fear, discomfort, or hatred of non-heterosexual people that is manifested at the individual level. So some people, what we call is internalized homophobia is another term, of course. And so if I'm gay, you know, I don't want people to know I'm gay. And so in order to prove that I'm not gay, I'm going to show how much I don't like all the gays. So, you know, that's an internalized sense of homophobia. And that is also, it's a thing. So homophobia is discomfort, fear, or even hatred of individuals who do not identify as heterosexual. So there's a nohomophobes.com website. You know, you always hear that's so gay or no homo. As you can see, this is just taken today. And these are the words just on Twitter, right? Isn't that right, Michael? I think these are just on Twitter. So faggot, that's just today. No homo, of course, is there. So gay and dyke. Those seems to be the ones. And as you see, just went up another one. So of course, we don't know the context in which this is being discussed. But it also does it today. It'll go by the last week. And then of course, it'll go over all time. All right. You can see some highs and lows over the course of the times that this has been monitored, but it's a really fascinating kind of look at those uses of those terms. So we want to put in a little bit of statistics. The LGBTQ community as a whole does have a higher number of barriers compared to the heterosexual or cisgendered peers. And this is according, of course, to the 2019 Southern LGBTQ Health Survey. Typically, incomes are less likely to be $24,000 a year. There is a higher reported food insecurity. And then also health insurance through work is really more pronounced against trans individuals and those of color that have less likely to have health insurance. So recently, according to the Supreme Court, Title VII prevents discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity under the sex category. So as we said before, you know, a marriage is legal here in the country, but that doesn't mean that everyone believes that it should be so. And there's still some barriers associated with that and discrimination associated with that. But according to the Supreme Court, you cannot be fired for your sexual orientation or gender identity, according to Title VII. But that doesn't mean it magically changes people's opinion or discrimination overnight. So it's just something to keep in mind. According to Pew Research in 2017, also, it looks like 4.5% of people in the United States identify as being part of the LGBTQ community. And accordingly, about 67% support gay marriage in America, so 67%. So that's gone up over the course. So there are some positive statistics as we move forward of increased acceptance of people that are part of the LGBTQ community. It has increased. So there's some good things there. But like I said, magically, discrimination is not going to disappear overnight.
And so thank you, Denise. And one of the things that we try and talk about after we present these statistics and we present all of the issues that LGBTQ individuals sometimes face is that, you know, we're sometimes left with this feeling of, well, what can we do? So we want to provide you with some ideas of how to help create an affirming community. So this is just kind of a continuum of ally development. So all of you here are at least at the aware stage, you know, knowing basic concepts now that you've participated in this training, and you know, you're at least at that stage. You're not apathetic. You don't have no understanding of the issues. But there are other ways to develop, and it may be that some of you are even further along this continuum. With folks that are active allies, they're well-informed, they're sharing, and they're seeking diversity when they're asked or prompted. And then advocates, and this is regardless as to whether you are an LGBTQ member of the community, or if you're just an ally, somebody who's concerned about the LGBTQ community. Advocates are committed. They routinely and proactively champion inclusion. And depending on the circumstances, and one of the things that we try and stress with folks, sometimes you may not be in a position where you can advocate. You know, you may not be, because ultimately we want everybody to feel like they can advocate for themselves and for others, but sometimes we're just not at that place, and that's okay. The advocacy, if you're really interested in becoming an ally, that's the goal to aim towards, but maybe someday you're just trying to take in information. You don't feel that you are in a position to advocate. That's okay. We really don't want folks to be at that apathetic stage. You know, we want folks to be aware that there are LGBTQ individuals in the community and that they need assistance in trying to have an inclusive workplace, an inclusive society, an inclusive world. So we wanted to give you a few ways that you can help to fight homophobia. So first of all, assuming that there are already LGBTQ people in your spaces, organizations, and work areas. Again, that's part of that heterocentrism, this idea that, oh, well, everybody is straight and cisgender. No, more than likely, they're not. More than likely, you already have people in your life, even if they aren't out, that are in the LGBTQ community. So go ahead and assume that they exist in your various spaces in life. And you can avoid gendered language that assumes everyone is straight. So case in point, you know, instead of saying to somebody who looks masculine, well, you know, do you have a wife or do you have a girlfriend? Do you have a partner? That's a way to open up space for somebody who is LGBTQ to feel comfortable in saying, you know, yes, I have a partner, or yes, I have a husband or wife, whatever. It allows that space to be open for them. Being intentional and inclusive about your business model and programming. So in this, we kind of mean going ahead and, again, creating that space for folks who are in the LGBTQ community to feel like, you know, this isn't just the story of these folks. This is a story for everybody. Everybody is included, and everybody's included in our workspace. Everybody's included in what we're doing in our professional life and in our personal life. So also bringing up current LGBTQ issues in conversation to show your support and to educate others. And so this gets back to, you know, helping to educate yourself so that you can bring up these issues. And displaying supportive symbols to show your support, you know, whether it's there are various flags. There's the rainbow flag that I'm sure a number of you are familiar with, but there are also flags for trans individuals, bi individuals. Displaying symbols helps folks to understand that this space is an open and welcoming space. One of the things that we've done at the college is adding pronouns to our email signatures. And for some folks who aren't as aware of LGBTQ issues, they may just overlook that. But for people who are, that's an instant sign that, yes, this person is somebody who I can talk to about LGBTQ issues. It opens up that space and that conversation. So recognizing that LGBTQ individuals are diverse. Again, this kind of goes back to what Michael was talking about earlier, this idea that just this one facet of somebody's existence is everything. So just because somebody identifies as a gay man, that's it. That's the be-all and end-all of their identity. This person may be African American. This person may be interested in history or sports. Thinking of LGBTQ people just like anybody else, we all have various facets of our lives, and we're not necessarily defined by one thing. We're not just defined by, our gender identity or sexual orientation or what we like to do on Saturdays. We are all of those things. And so recognizing the various facets of somebody's life is important, especially in the LGBTQ context, because we've mentioned a couple of times that sometimes other facets of somebody's life, like their race or ethnicity or their religion, may also feed into some of the discrimination and that they are facing. So it's important to recognize that just their identity as a member of the LGBTQ community isn't the be all and end all of who they are. Thinking critically about presentations of LGBTQ issues in the media. So for the longest time, I can remember growing up, and anytime you saw a gay man represented in media, they were typically single. It was typically, this vivacious person, and it was almost like a comical feature. And while, yes, that, if that is somebody's identity, that's great, but that's not all gay men. Likewise, trans individuals for a long time in the media typically were on crime shows. They were typically victims. And no, all trans individuals are not victimized in that way. There are trans individuals that go through life and are very happy and fulfilled. And we want to make sure to highlight that LGBTQ individuals don't just fit into one stereotype. They're not just this. They face issues in society, but they're also very happy and diverse ways that they live their lives. So that's important to look at media and look at the stereotypes that are being presented in media, and stereotypes make things so that we don't understand the full spectrum of an experience or of a community. Also, being sure your HR departments are up to date on the most recent developments with LGBTQ related policies. So as Denise mentioned, we recently had the Supreme Court ruling. We need to make sure that HR departments are aware of that and that they know what it means for the organization and for LGBTQ members of the organization. And so we just wanted to leave you with some community resources. So that way you can start to go beyond this knowledge and build up your knowledge, build up your experience. So as I'm sure many of you are lovers of history, we've got a few resources here. The King Henry Brockington collection at the UNC Charlotte Atkins Library. It's the largest collection of LGBTQ history in North Carolina. So we have the website on there, and whenever we send out the slides, you can always go to that website to check it out. We also mentioned the Quist app, and so this app has information about LGBTQ history around the country. It also has a This Day in LGBTQ History feature. So it's a great way to learn about the history of the community. PFLAG Charlotte. PFLAG Charlotte works to support and inform families of LGBTQ people, because that's one thing that we try to understand, that when somebody's coming out, it's not, they have things that they need support on, but also family members and friends want to understand how to support the person that they love who is coming out. So PFLAG Charlotte is a great resource for that. Time Out Youth, Denise had mentioned them earlier. So Time Out Youth works primarily with middle and high school aged youth. They have great programming. We've partnered with them on numerous occasions over the years, and they're great to work with. So highly recommend that you learn more about them. They are a great resource in our community. The trans healthcare group, and this is important because this goes back to kind of the point earlier that trans individuals sometimes are placed in uncomfortable positions and awkward positions when they're trying to seek medical care. So the Trans Healthcare Group was created. They're a group of licensed healthcare and mental health professionals that are focused on meeting the unique needs of transgender individuals and making them feel like this is a safe space that they can seek medical care that they need, and to hopefully seek preventative care, and make sure that they get their needs met just like anybody else. So Transcend Charlotte, they're a great group that has support groups. They have the Trans Closet. So for individuals who are wanting to present that gender expression outside, the Trans Closet allows them an opportunity to get new clothes that speak more towards the gender identity that they want to express. They also have therapy services and referrals. Equality North Carolina is a group that fights for legislation to protect and advocate for LGBTQ individuals in North Carolina. They have a speaker series, and they are a great statewide resource. And so we also wanted to mention the Regional AIDS Interfaith Network, or RAIN. HIV and AIDS has been an issue for decades, and it's been an issue for the LGBTQ community as well as the larger community. And RAIN has been a great resource over the years in trying to help not only be advocates, but also provide resources to people who are HIV positive. We have some statistics here. So in North Carolina, there's an estimated 34,187 people living with HIV or AIDS. And in 2016, there were just under 1,400 new HIV diagnoses. Because there have been other issues that have gotten more prominence over the years in the media, some folks kind of have this idea that, this isn't still an issue, or still isn't quite as big of an issue. It is. And especially one of the things that we note here is the majority of carriers of HIV are African American and male. This is a group that is already facing discrimination and prejudice in our community. So we want to make sure that we understand that this is a group that is still there to provide resources to folks who are HIV positive or diagnosed with AIDS. And so thank you so much for coming. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself, or if you want to send in a question through the chat, we're more than glad to answer any questions you may have.
I don't know how much time we have left for questions. Are we finishing at 12:30?
I think we were shooting for 12:30, so we've got a little bit less than 10 minutes or so if anybody has any questions.
I did want to say, so I have done this training before with Jerry, Michael, and Denise, and I went back to Rural Hill, and one of the first things I did was ungender all of our wedding stuff. Because actually that was my whole point in going, was being more inclusive when it came to our wedding business. And by ungendering all of that, not only did I make it more comfortable for queer people, but I got a lot more grooms, like in heterosexual couples, coming as well to both our wedding fairs and our general stuff, because it's not so female centric.
And that's the thing, like starting that conversation and not always knowing how, because sometimes there are things that we're not even thinking about whenever we make changes like that. So, I mean, that's a great example. And that's one of the things, like, even at the college, we've been involved in this work for years. And the more we start to have conversations, we get questions, well, what about this? Oh, well, we haven't really thought about this. And it's going to be a constant conversation. We can't get it all right at the beginning, but opening up that space and starting to have those conversations, that is an amazing thing. And it leads you in directions and opportunities that you may not have imagined, but it creates a space that is more inclusive for everybody. And that's ultimately the goal.
Did you run into any barriers, or was that difficult for you to do?
No, not at all. Now, I still haven't like we haven't like rainbowed up our wedding stuff or anything like that, because like that's, you know, I don't think it fits with our brand anyway, like as a historic site. But no, they really was very easy. Now, changing my language during the tour, instead of saying like bridal suite and groom's room, like just saying like wedding suite, that was difficult, but now it's more automatic.
Yeah, just like with pronouns, right? It's like it's a little tricky at first, and then you just say the words over and over again out loud, and it just becomes easier over time. That's great.
I know one of the things that we've done, and we've done similar as you, Jess, with our wedding things that they haven't been published yet due to the pandemic, was taking more pictures to go onto our website and rental brochures for weddings, showing same-sex couples and what have you as well. But we, within the past year, also turned all of our bathrooms into genderless bathrooms, basically. So everything is take your pick, which one you go into, which is a lot of fun. And we're a little bit different also because we're a county-owned facility, so we're a governmental facility. But I have to say our HR department, so we report to the HR department for the county, has been absolutely fabulous. When they came in to change all the museum's bathrooms per our request, they then systematically went out throughout the county, and where they could, they've started changing all the bathrooms throughout Gaston County government buildings into non-gender conforming bathrooms, which has been great. And they've gotten a little bit of flack.
Right?
Geez, if Gaston County can do it, anyone can do it.
Fair point. Fair point.
Yeah, it's great hearing how this has already been implemented in Charlotte and in the wider area. That's really encouraging to hear. So like we said towards the beginning, we are going to just download this as a PDF and send it out to y'all so that you can review this information. All the links should be available. If there are any issues with that, can let us know. And we also have a link to an evaluation. We've never done so much of a community-focused training before. We're really mostly with the college, so this is kind of a fun opportunity for us to be able to come out and do this. So we'd really appreciate if you can take the time to fill out the evaluation, just to let us know what you thought about the training, any suggestions for improvement, or if you liked it, what you liked about it. All that stuff is very helpful for us, and it also helps us report back to our superiors to let us know that this is a helpful thing, if you felt that it was helpful, so that we can continue doing this work. So we really appreciate that.
And that will go out in an email tomorrow. So you'll get the email thanking you for attending, and then it will also include the link. And it's a pretty short survey, so please do complete that.
Guys, thank you very much for doing this for us.
This was great. And I think even just having the PDF that we can share with anyone who wasn't able to attend, that will be a great introduction, even without the presentation, to be able to at least get to that aware stage, right?
Yeah, keep doing the great work y'all are doing in your areas, it sounds like already. And thank you for inviting us just to present the information. Was great.
Absolutely. All right. Well, it looks like we're right up on 12:30. If you guys have any questions, if you think of anything else afterwards, feel free to email me. In your registration, you'll see my CRHC email. Otherwise, we will see you guys next time. For our members, we have our next webinar kind of lecture will be in 2 weeks from today, and we'll be talking with Nicole Moore and Dontavius Williams, who do historic interpretation as enslaved folks. So they're going to be talking about doing first-person interpretation, but putting the person first, and how some of us can implement that at our sites, either with or without outside interpreters. So tune into that. We do have the link to that on our Facebook and in the last email, and we'll send out a reminder as well. All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming. Thanks for presenting.
Thank you so much, everyone.
And thank you, Kate, for hosting.
Oh, and by the way, guys, yeah, find Jerry on Facebook, Twitter, everywhere as a presidential podcast, right?
Yeah, so the Presidencies of the United States on Facebook at Presidencies, on Twitter at Presidencies89, and on Instagram as Presidencies Podcast, all one word.
Right. Okay, thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.